With Veeam Backup for Microsoft Office 365, you can mitigate the risk of losing access to your Office 365 data, letting you store your backup, well, anywhere you want. Either on-prem, in a cloud like Azure or AWS, or with the help of a service provider, giving you peace of mind that critical Exchange, SharePoint, OneDrive and Microsoft Teams data is all protected and easily restored. Over 75,000 IT pros have made the right choice to protect their Office 365 data with Veeam. Will you be next? Veeam, the #1 choice for Office 365 backup. Visit veeam.com for more information.
Welcome to day 2 of ESPC 21 Online. We are so excited to begin today with an exceptional live keynote. We're incredibly proud to welcome the amazing Paula Januszkiewicz, CEO and founder of Secure.
Hi, welcome to my presentation, Hackers Paradise, Top 10 Biggest Threats When Working From Home. My name is Paula Januszkiewicz and I'm the CEO of Secure and Secure Academy, as well as cybersecurity expert for the past 15 years, having as well access to the source code of Windows and being Microsoft Regional Director and MVP, even though I'm technically not working for Microsoft. This presentation is going to cover various experiences that we gain by participating in cybersecurity posture of our customers in 2020, learning and facing and solving their challenges when implementing secure working from home idea. And at the end, we learned a couple of lessons, and that is something that I would like to share with you. Workplaces, especially ones in regions that are hit hard by COVID-19, are actually struggling for implementing different solutions, but at the same time maintaining the good state, the good posture for cybersecurity. So when we look at the various perspectives that different statistic organizations we're looking at, we've learned that, for example, from the perspective of CISA, so the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency as a part of Homeland Security, these guys, they actually issued an alert encouraging organizations to take the heightened approach to cybersecurity. And they actually cited the possibility of increased vulnerabilities, attacks, and phishing attempts. So that is something that we are able to summarize right now, because when we look into various reports summarizing 2020, lots of them say that approximately 60% of attacks are caused by phishing attempts. And another research piece actually put out by Checkpoint, it actually shows that cyber criminals are using the coronavirus pandemic to spread spam activity through both email campaigns and also malicious domains. At the same time, when we look at the data security, because we have to share data with others, no matter what, because we have to cooperate with each other during pandemics, we can see that in US particularly, since 2005, there have been 10,000 serious breaches that have been publicly reported according to the Identity Theft Resource Center, so the ITRC. And that kind of a rapid shift to remote work without well-established protocols will likely create even more opportunity for cyber criminals. So if technically you are implementing security for the remote work for your staff, question would be, what can you do to keep your data secure and your workforce at the same time productive? Within this presentation, we're going to discuss 10, as you already know, biggest mistakes that are committed when working from home. So when we are providing access to various remote services to the employees, question is not only how we do it, but another perspective would be what kind of security we've got on the workstations. So if, for example, I leave my workstation unlocked and I'm working from home, how can I be sure that when I'm not really looking at my workstation right now, there won't be someone that's going to come over and, let's say, it could be a kid starting some kind of a malicious game, getting into the malicious website, clicking on a malicious link. So question would be, are we ready for that? Another perspective is that if we work remotely, how can we be sure, as someone planning security in the organization, that someone is connecting to our organization through a secure network? We could be thinking, well, yes, but we've got a VPN. But when we connect the dots, and when someone manages to get access to the employee's workstation, and at the same time that employee is connected using the VPN connection to the organization, we can, for example, be dealing with the VPN pivoting attack, which could potentially also expose our internal resources, especially taking into consideration the fact if we are dealing with shadow IT. So all different solutions out there inside the organization that are set up without the compliance, and at the same time, they are a low-hanging fruit for an attacker to misuse. So one of the first things that I decided to put on the list, that will be disabling firewall, or I would rather say misconfiguring firewall, as actually one of the mistakes that we are observing when working from home. And what we mean by this is that if, for example, user receives a phishing email, and this doesn't always relate to working from home, right? Because it's whenever you bring your computer to the office as well. But that working from home concept especially gives the attention to that kind of a problem, that when the user opens up an email, there is an attachment, could be a malicious macro, user enables the macro, runs the macro, then what we got underneath is a child process being created, so technically some kind of an executable, right? Could be even PowerShell, that at the end is executing some kind of a code that is most possibly connecting with the network. So the question is, are we allowing processes that we don't know, well, first of all, to run, but second, to communicate over the network? And that is the example that I would love to show you. Within this demonstration, we're going to be dealing with a situation where user receives some kind of a email, or that could be an Excel spreadsheet within the email as an attachment, and at the same time, there will be a concept where there's going to be hackers sitting on the other side, and user, unfortunately, will become a victim of a hacker. So here we've got a listener set up on the Kali side. So this is a hacker. On the right side, user gets an email, and here there is actually an Excel spreadsheet with a macro. So dear sir or madam, it could be even sent by our colleague from the company because their account could be affected. So over here, we open it up, and then we've got information that is related with a macro. So here we had a security warning, which we ignored, and then we run the macro, and then at the end, there is some kind of executable fired up that is actually a reverse shell underneath, and that reverse shell caused this code to run and connect back to the hacker. When we look at the details, we've got in a whole macro one big button where underneath we are downloading the text file. So if firewall rule is preventing executables, then this most probably won't work. And over here, we've got the encoding. So we've got a kali.exe at the end that we are running. And then basically we are converting the text file to an executable. And at the end, who am I? You can see that we've got a reverse shell running. And then basically I managed to get access to my computer over here. So this is how we are able to affect the user's computer. And at the same time, we can play over here with data encryption, data theft. We can actually download particularly some kind of a code that we will be able to execute. So this is actually the privilege escalation script, also leveraging one of the vulnerabilities within Windows. And after we execute it, we would be able, for example, to move from the, let's say, a regular user to more privileged account. Yeah? So over here, we would be able to do it this way, but it doesn't have to go this way. Yeah? So it's enough to be a user in order to extract from the user's browser, for example, stored passwords. Now, when we run that script, we are over here executing a vulnerability. So we are technically loading a malicious DLL into one of the processes. And at the same time, this code gets executed. So this is actually loaded by the test scheduler upon service startup. And over here, we would be able to run that particular service in order to take higher privileges within this operating system. So we're going to use curl over here to run the reverse DLL over here. And then basically we are getting that into the Python folder. And at the same time, this will allow us, again, to take over that particular service DLL. So this is what we are doing. We are replacing it. And right now we've got that DLL within the user's computer. And when we technically restart that machine, restart that service, and so on, that will be the service that will allow us to be more privileged in this computer. So here we are again setting up a listener. That is an important factor over here on the hacker side. And then the Paula J's computer is restarting. And as a result, we're going to have a service starting, loading a malicious DLL, and at the same time, we would be able to take over this particular system. Have a look. On the left side, we are no longer a user, but we are actually anti-authority system. So what we've observed within this demonstration is that thanks to the macro and thanks to, for example, a vulnerability that was out there within the operating system, we were able to take over that machine. But as I said again, we don't have to escalate ourselves to local system. There might be 0 vulnerabilities and eventually we're not able to do it, but we're going to be acting as a user that might be also taking us to the different area in the infrastructure where we're going to be, for example, checking on what kind of data is out there. We could also encrypt that data and so on. So there are plenty of options we could implement. So that problem number 2, just to mention, it's overly simple passwords and security questions. So over here, we would be able to play with, for example, guessing the user password and then taking over the user's account in order to technically use it and log in with it, maybe in our infrastructure services, but it could be maybe somewhere else if the user is reusing the password. This actually takes us to one example that I would like to give you, which was technically the pen test that I was doing for approximately 6,000 accounts, and I did the password spray for that company, and that was actually at the end of 2020. So eventually I managed to get access to that 29 accounts that were there with the password, company name, and at the end there was a 2020. So that was actually quite fun because eventually they did not have multi-factor authentication, and I was able to log into mailboxes of various users, which at the same time when I used these ones and I send emails to the colleagues at work, then basically it's a different level of phishing, right? But that takes us to the next step over here, which is no network segmentation. When we take into consideration this part, question would be how we are able to treat that as a problem. So I was mentioning VPN pivoting, and I was also mentioning a situation where user is connected to the organization by using the public Wi-Fi, and then someone managed to get access to the user's workstation. It could be even through phishing. And from that level, we are able to get access further in order to use the VPN of that user's computer. So a hacker, by sitting on a user's computer, will treat the workstation simply as a proxy. Let's have a look at the VPN pivoting attack to learn what kind of possibilities we've got to technically hop through the user workstation and lurk into the infrastructure's network. Within the VPN pivoting attack, over here, we just have a user's console. Yeah, so here we're going to be verifying whether we are able to list local resources or not. So this is simply client's machine. Our job is going to be to verify if we have access to the local resources. So let's say ping SRV01 raccoons PL. And then we will also try to open a website where we're going to learn whether we can see the local resources or not. Yeah, so ping is one thing, but the website is the other one. So here you can see that we are not able at some point to see that website because simply we are outside. So right now we're going to connect using VPN. So standard stuff that users using remote work do. Now the next part, it's going to be to verify these resources again. As you can simply guess, we will be able to get response, and then in the meantime we can refresh the page and you can see that this is available, and that's some JBoss application server which potentially could be as well vulnerable. Yeah, so here we are able to see that we've got a reply from the internal resources. Not a big deal. The problem is that if the hacker manages to get access to that particular workstation, we're able to use it as a proxy in order to browse the local resources. Let's give it a try. First of all, as an attacker being within the same subnet as the user or having remote access to the user's box, we can try to browse local resources that are from the inside of the VPN that the user is connected to. And then, even if I use Nmap here, that doesn't work. So basically, what will be our case is that if we're going to do ifconfig, you can see that we've got the 192.168.2.1.100 IP address, which is completely different than the one that we have within the VPN of the user. So the next stage would be if there is some kind of vulnerability, and I'm saying some kind of on the user side, then basically here on the hacker side, we are setting up a listener. So we've got a lhost, lport, and we are setting up the payload, as you see. And that particular payload is Windows x64 Meterpreter reverse TCP, which means that we're going to be serving the reverse TCP as a response if the user is going to connect to the hacker's computer. So this is basically the background. The next stage over here is to set up exploit, and then after that, if the exploit is running on a user's computer, could be the macro that user opens or anything like that, really. So we are taking over the user workstation. As you see on the previous demonstration, here we are sending stage to the user's computer that is, for example, within the home network or just by having control on the top of that user's computer. And then we got a Meterpreter session 1 opened. And that is the one that we have established to the user's computer. Now, exciting part about that is that over here we've got a direct connection to the user's computer, but we are not yet connected to the user's VPN network. And that is exactly what it's all about. So the next stage, it's going to be related with verifying what kind of connections are there. So we just exit this one to get into sessions, and we're going to be interacting with the session ID 1 so that we can, for the next part, run shell and then verify who we are. And over here, we're going to be that user. So it could be, for example, through phishing. Now, hostname, we are on the user's computer, and if the hacker runs ipconfig, we are able to see over here that there is another connection that's called VPN2, and this is another type of IP address assigned over here. So it would be great to interact with this VPN. So how can we do that? And that's what this attack is all about interaction with the user's VPN in order to treat the workstation as a proxy to avoid being directly detected as a foreign dodgy connection from the outside. So here we're going to run PowerShell, and then we're going to specify our tools. So just for the reference, if the user has stored password in the user's configuration for the VPN, we are able to extract it too, because that's the part of a data protection API that's running as a user. So another perspective here. Now the next part over here would be to not to use directly this VPN connection, because we don't want to be discovered. Plus, there might be actually multi-factor implemented, so that won't work for us. But to actually use the user's computer, as I already mentioned, as a proxy. So let's do that. The next part over here would be to set up that workstation this way. So we will need to run that particular session in the background. And then the next stage, it's going to be to set up, run sessions once again, so that we can see that that's the ID 1. And that is what is important for us, because here we're going to specify use auxiliary server, and then we're going to name SOCKS 4A. And we're going to be interacting and assigning the communication to this session. So show options, and over here, this is a basic setup. We've got over here server port 1080, which we could be using, and here we're going to be adding the root, so root at, to actually target the workstation over here. So we've got the subnet, and then basically we're going to be sending our traffic through the user subnet. So anything from that subnet is going to go particularly to this session or through the session 1 Yeah, so this is how we set up, in this case, proxy-alike connection that will allow us to see directly resources that the user can see using VPN. So let's do run, and over here we've got the proxy server running on the certain port. So let's verify whether this works, and then we've got nmap to the resources like 10, 10, 10, 20. Yeah, and over here we've got the result where we are able to observe that this communication is there. So when we use proxy chains and then we've got the port scan, we are able to see that we've got a legit response. So it's not like in a previous scan where there was literally no response. And at that stage, we can see what kind of ports are open. So if we are right now within the hacker's position, we would be able to use Firefox through proxy chains. So let's do that. And we run the browser by leveraging proxy that we have set up. And now we can access once again our raccoons, our server over here. And that's actually, so we can access over here once again our server. And this is our JBoss server that we are leveraging here. Okay, so what we were able to observe in this demonstration is how to take over the machine and at the same time use it as a proxy in order to connect to the organization's network. Now the next stage is actually quite exciting because here, if we are inside that network and we are able to perform the further attacks, we would be able, for example, to perform the net bias scanning, maybe run some responder attack when we are actually poisoning the network with the net bias responses and queries and so on. So the in general net bias communication. Therefore, SMB relay comes to place. So let's have a look how we are able to perform this attack very quickly and how at the same time this attack could be dangerous for us. So what you guys see on the screen right now, that's the hacker's machine where we are setting up SMB relay X Python script, and our target machine this time is going to be 10, 10, 10, 250. So we are assuming over here that hacker is in the network and hacker is trying to, get access to the other machine by listening to the NTLM version 2 communication, so authentication, response, and challenge. And at the same time, we are able over here to capture, for example, administrator logging on using the / IP or short name like files or something in order to trigger NTLM version 2 authentication. Then we take the response, and then basically we're going to be leveraging that in the SMB relay X script. So everything is happening automatically, yeah? Just a little bit of explanation. This CQ shell over here, that's nothing but a reverse shell that we're going to be using so that when it's executed, then basically at that certain level, here we're going to be not only listening for the incoming connections, but that will be something that when executed on the target side, it's going to connect back to the listening hacker. And here you are able to see the listener set up for the incoming connections. So listener / handler, here we have everything preset over here. It's a very easy setup. So once we run exploit, we'll be waiting for the incoming connections from the infrastructure. And then when we're going to have a session established to our target, we're going to see basically who we are. But we are hunting here for administrative accounts. So from user, eventually, to domain admin, maybe. But let's see what we got. So once we exploit it, then an authentication has to happen. And then the next stage would be related with simply the attack. So here, started reverse shell. Over here, we are running the script particularly. Yeah, so this is the one running in the relay mode. And then the next stage, it's going to be to set up a connection. Yeah, so this is what I'm going to do on my side, where I'm going to query the simply IP address, so / certain IP. And this particular script that we have on the Linux side performs actually as well ERP poisoning. And we are able to capture the authentication response and we are able to relay it to the other host. Yeah, so that is what we're going to see in here. So after this authentication happens, Then here we are waiting for the incoming connection. That's what happened. And then eventually we captured over here the NTLM version 2 response through SMB relay attack, SMB not being signed. Here we are listing the processes that are running as local systems. So this SVC host, we do migrate to 3136, which we can do because we are privileged user right now, because we captured authentication of the privileged user somewhere else. And then over here, we've got already migration to the process established. And migration means that we are injecting the code into the process memory so that we can directly be and act from that process. And once we do shell, who am I? Here you are able to see that we are actually anti-authority system. This is an attack that is quite easy to be discovered, because within this attack, not only you are able to execute the code that we don't know, so that will be the first part, but also you are able to establish connection from that box, from the client's box, run that CQ shell, reverse shell to establish a connection somewhere else. So that's again the case with the firewall that we were discussing at the very beginning. And if it's about the code execution itself, then over here, we've got that information, for example, stored in a prefetch, in a C Windows prefetch directory that monitors history about what executed. But come on, who would monitor prefetch? That's why it's so important to not only implement whitelisting in our organization to secure not only the remote access, but also what executes on the servers, but at the same time to implement SMB signing that assures that traffic cannot be modified when on the fly. Yes, so we've got this perspective. Now, whitelisting in general, it's definitely a direction for so many years right now, and all together with the exploit guard would prevent this attack because I was performing process migration, which means I was injecting a code directly into the process memory, and that is actually a known injection technique. So in general, when we've got this kind of situation, here we are allowing, for example, even PowerShell to run, but at the end, the major mistake, if we could summarize it, it's no whitelisting on board. Because unusual code is one thing, but whitelisting is another part. Of course, they go along together, but when we say whitelisting, what we mean by that is, for example, prevention of running things like certutil in order to download malicious files, prevention to run things like bitadmin, prevention to run, in general, various other operating system files that when used in a certain context could bring danger. And what I'm talking about, it's lolbus/lolbins, so the living of the land binaries that when implementing good whitelisting, we should definitely have a look at. At the end, we've got as well old protocols or their default settings. Summarizing, we were using over here NTLM version 2. Would that be better to use Kerberos all over? Well, first of all, it's not safe too, because, for example, for the service accounts and in general using service principal names, we are able to request for the service account a ticket that will be encrypted with the service account's password hash, but at the same time we can crack that password, and because for services password do not expire, we've got a long time to do it. That's why this attack is called curb roasting, because we are slowly roasting the password. So that is the problem with the Kerberos. So I'm not saying moving to Kerberos, it's like I would never say that. But the problem is that NTLM version 2, it's still there. And when combined all together with NetBIOS not being disabled and SMB not being signed, that could bring a problem. The same story is with SQL Server and the TDS, so the tabular data stream, where we are able to communicate with a SQL Server database using clear text. And by default, that's like this in the vast majority of organizations that I've been dealing with. As well, something to have a look at, because if someone is sniffing the network, then this person is able to see the clear text queries happening within the connection to the SQL Server. Also, one of the mistakes is we're trusting solutions without knowing how to break them. And at the same time, this brings us so many situations to discuss over here. Let me start over here command prompt with administrative privileges to show you one tiny thing around what can we actually do regarding these solutions. If I do run FLT-MC, this is something that allows me to, at the same time, list something that we call mini filter drivers. And Sysmon is one of those. If we install Sysmon, you can see that Sysmon is actually already installed. But what I did that is technically not on the list, I have at that point, so we can actually uninstall it and install it once again, I have unloaded it. And Sysmon driver, once again by running FLTMC, it's again here on the list. So what am I supposed to do to unload it? Well, FLTMC, unload, and then basically Sysmon driver. And this, when we run FLTMC, allows us to unload the Sysmon driver that is monitoring, for example, metadata being changed on the disk and so on. So all the disk-related operations, processes, and so on. So here you are able to see that we are eventually able to very quickly unload at that stage the driver. So Sysmon is fantastic. But of course, in order to be able to unload a driver, you have to have a privilege to do it. But if the user has this privilege, that could be also something that could surprise us. And that's my point. We need to know the weak points of solutions before we start using them. We could see theoretically nothing new, but at the same time, whenever, for example, someone is able to stop an antivirus, how to stop your antivirus, how to stop, for example, defenders, how to stop McAfee. So these are the things that we need to know in order to be evaluate later on how certain attack happened. And then misusing service accounts, which we actually observe that this is quite a big problem in the organization. Therefore, I would love to show you within the demo how we are able to extract passwords from the service accounts. This is actually one of my favorite demonstrations where we are able to see how eventually on the side of a client over here, we are able to extract the password for the account that is called Freddy Krueger on the Paula's service. So this is just a simple setup that we see on everyday basis in the organization. So this is one of the ideas. And at the end, what we're going to do, we're going to be extracting the service account password. So let's do it by using the CQ Secrets Dumper. And CQ Secrets Dumper is actually our tool that we are after this presentation sharing. So here you are able to see that we've got Freddy Krueger and then there is a password being stored. So that's the one. When the password is stored like that, it has to be technically somewhere, most probably in a registry, so that eventually service accounts passwords and service accounts and also scheduled tasks, that's something that we call local system secrets or LSA secrets, and passwords of these guys are stored in a registry in a reversible way. So long story short, we are able to extract the password like this. First, if we try to extract the password by having the console running with the administrative privileges, let's just run that. We've got a CQ Secrets Dumper /service, and then we just give a name PJ service. Let's see what would be the result. And then we are able to see that requested registry access is not allowed. Yes, because Security Hive, where the passwords are stored, is accessible only if you are a local system. So what's the problem to elevate? psexec -sid cmd.exe, enter. And then the next part would be related with technically getting into we can get into who am I, we can see that we are system over here, and then we can go to the CQ tools and CQ Secrets Dumper. And then eventually service, PJ service, and this is how you are able to see that we are able to extract password for this particular service account. This is something, guys, that we are able to use as a lateral movement and then eventually move to the further areas within the infrastructure. And number 10, it's falling for evil tools. So when the users are sitting at home and they sit all the time in front of computer, they might be tempted to run various standalone applications, different solutions, different tools, maybe games that look like digitally signed, or they might not even be, but if they are digitally signed, the question will be who actually signed them and so on. That's why, of course, this is another reason to implement whitelisting that is disallowing users to use software that is technically not approved by the certain organization. We have to remember that every app that is run as user, so in the context of the user, is able to extract credentials that users stored within these particular other apps, like Chrome, like Outlook, and so on. It's enough to look at Nearsoft tools or at Lasagne that is able to extract passwords, of course, for the hacking purpose. From the Lasagne perspective, it's an automated tool to extract secrets of the user in order to be used later by the hacker. So let's have a look. In summary, 11 key cybersecurity questions. So I'm leaving you actually with these ones because currently within the remote work time where we are definitely more targeted because hackers are not really sleeping, so they are sending phishing. These phishing attempts and attacks, they have increased. We never had so many projects on incident response like during the pandemics. And at the same time, there are a couple of questions that arise. One of those is, do we have insurance? Do we need an insurance? Do we need a specialist team immediately when our whole infrastructure is encrypted? This is actually the case of the customer that we are dealing with recently. Do we actually regularly evaluate the effectiveness of our security? Do we have an organized incident response plan? Because as experience shows, lots of the customers that we are getting into at the first moment when there is an incident response, they technically do not have that. And summarizing, best practices means understanding is the key to security. So we need to continuously review misconfigurations of our infrastructure and continuously follow what's new out there. In order to be ready for the upcoming threats, we have to provide a configuration review regularly every single solution that we introduce in the infrastructure. And of course, sometimes it's good to put on hacker shoes and deliver the pentest/red teaming activity to verify whether we have appropriate monitoring implemented in our organization. So if you guys want to download the tools, please have a look at resources, secureacademy.com/tools with the following username and password. Here we go. And if you would like to get more details about different videos, articles, and so on, how to improve our security posture, then have a look at secureacademy.com/blog. And don't forget about our online education where you are able to learn how technically protect ourselves from the current threats. Thank you so much. This was Paula speaking.